Deputy Mick Barry.
Taoiseach, Aerlingus asked their cabin crew to accept a 4-year pay freeze, new yellow pack starting rates and cuts to both sick pay and duty allowances. Go back in the sky, wear a sunny smile and put your lipstick on, but don't forget the hair shirt. To the credit of these workers, they voted 80% plus to reject that package. The company have threatened these mainly women workers with unilateral imposition of even more draconian terms now, including temporary layoffs for senior staff and freezing the pay of those senior staff at 60% of what it was previously. Similar retaliation is expected against ground staff should the result of their ballot, expected tonight, also be a no. What kind of message does it send to the country if frontline workers who kept this country connected through 18 months of a pandemic are allowed to be treated in this way? And what does it say about your government if you allow it? Now, the state pays a large share of this company's wage bill through the EWSS. The state provided Aerlingus with €150 million in debt funding in February through the Irish Strategic Investment Fund. Are you prepared to use the leverage this provides you with to protect these workers from such abuse? And if not, why not? The airline industry was hit hard by the pandemic, but Aerlingus had €900 million in reserve when it started, and the tide is starting to turn in aviation now. Last week, Michael O'Leary said that Ryanair flew 67% of its normal passenger numbers in August, and forecast a dramatic increase in holiday tourism next year. But airlines will seek to make up for lost profits in a post-pandemic world, and this can come not merely at the expense of their workers, but also of less profitable routes. Taoiseach, can you guarantee that Aerlingus will continue to provide the level of connectivity the Irish people need and deserve? Are the 23 Heathrow slots guaranteed? The US is opening up now in November. Shannon remains closed. Will all the routes from Ireland to US cities be restarted and guaranteed into the future? I don't think you can guarantee that they will be. An airline which shows such lack of loyalty to its staff cannot be relied upon to show loyalty to the country either. Aerlingus's bottom line is to serve the interests of shareholders, not the interests of the Irish people. For this reason, I support the renationalisation of Aerlingus. I think the Aerlingus unions should support and campaign for this position too. So where does the government stand on that issue? And where do you stand, crucially, on the rights of workers in a company so heavily subsidised by this state?
Thank you, Deputy Barry. Taoiseach.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Aviation, as we all know, is one of the sectors worst affected by the pandemic, and many airlines have experienced a severe drop in revenue and are facing degrees of financial challenge. The aviation recovery in Ireland has been much slower than other states. We're back to about 50% of where we were. As you pointed out, Ryanair, which operates all across Europe, points out that the rest of Europe is about 70% back to where it was. Aerlingus in particular has been affected to a larger extent than other airlines due to its reliance on the slow recovering Irish market and the transatlantic market. Data showed that the Irish aviation market is experiencing a slower recovery than the majority of its European counterparts. In addition, Aerlingus's transatlantic network has yet to recover to any great extent due to the travel restrictions which remain in place in the United States. The announcement made by the US government that it's going to lift travel restrictions for fully vaccinated travellers from Ireland and from the UK and from the rest of Europe in November is therefore a very welcome development and should help us to begin the recovery in transatlantic services. It'll be very welcome for families, many of whom haven't seen friends and relations in the United States for a long time, and welcome for business too, because there is so much trade between the United States and Ireland, and so many people haven't been able to visit their businesses or co-workers. In relation to the industrial relations matters that the Deputy raises, the Deputy will be aware that these are matters for the company, Aerlingus, and their respective trade unions. Both the Workplace Relations Commission and the Labour Court, which are government offices under the aegis of my department, are available to assist if called upon. We want to make that message very clear to the company and to the unions that the WRC and the Labour Court are available should their services be needed and should a government intervention be warranted. In terms of your question on connectivity, Deputy, nobody can give you any guarantees on connectivity. It's quite simple, really. Connectivity happens when a route is viable, when the cost of running the plane is matched by the fares that passengers pay. And the important thing that we need to do now is to make flights viable so that we can have connectivity. And government will help with this. We're working on a package of financial support for airlines and for airports to encourage them to restore those routes. Other governments are doing it across Europe. We need to do it too, to make sure that the planes that are flying again are flying in and out of Ireland and that we restore that connectivity. But fundamentally, a route is only viable if the cost of running it is matched by the fares that come in. So you need to have fares coming in and you need to keep costs under control.
Thank you, Tánaiste. Deputy Barry.
There's class warfare, all right, but it's my class that's making war, and we're winning. Not the words of a socialist, not the words of a trade union militant, but those of American billionaire Warren Buffett. Words that are very relevant in this case. In 2019, IAG made an operating profit of more than €2.5 billion, 4 times and more the temporary Aerlingus losses. Meanwhile, workers with families have to fork out rents greater than their pandemic wage and rely on parents to help finance their weekly food shop. Workers need to get organised to protect their interests. Any worker who wants help in getting organised in this instance can contact my office. We'll do our best. The revival of air traffic gives workers increased leverage and some potential power here. So too does the fact that the Taoiseach and Ministers Coveney, McGrath and O'Brien represent airport constituencies. It is time for workers to pile the pressure on these politicians who are subsidising a company while it wages a war on its own workforce.
Thank you, Deputy Barry. Tánaiste.
Thanks, Deputy. You know, the only person who's interested in class warfare in this House is probably you and maybe some of the colleagues around you. And you're interested in it because you hope to benefit from it politically and electorally, and that's your choice. What we're interested in this side of the House is saving businesses and saving jobs, and that includes Aerlingus. And that's why we've done what we've done. These subsidies that you refer to, the employment wage subsidy scheme, is helping to keep people in their jobs. There are people in your own constituency in Cork who would have been laid off for the last couple of weeks were it not for the government's wage subsidy scheme ensuring that they could be kept on the payroll. It's why we're providing funding to airports like Shannon and Cork and Dublin to help them get through this period. It's why we brought in things like the digital COVID cert to enable people to travel again. So we're absolutely committed to getting aviation going again. It can be done, but it needs people working together. It doesn't need warfare.